Welcome to the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Nathu. Today's deep dive is a bit different.
Oh, how so?
We're looking at Einstein, his life and universe, the biography by Walter Isaacson.
Okay, I'm familiar with that one. It's pretty dense though, right?
It is. That's why we're using Anil Nathu's 1 Hour Guide as our kind of like cheat sheet.
So we're not just talking about physics.
Nope. The guide pulls out leadership and entrepreneurship insights from Einstein's life, which is fascinating.
I'm intrigued. What does a theoretical physicist have to do with business anyway?
Right, you'd think there's no connection. But prepare to be amazed.
Okay, you've got my attention. Tell me more.
Well, first off, Isaacson doesn't portray Einstein as this, untouchable genius.
Which is how we usually think of him, right? All Aimsiak and crazy hair.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the book humanizes him. What struck you about that portrayal?
It was how Isaacson revealed Einstein's struggles, you know? He had a rebellious side, didn't always conform.
He did. Bucking the system in academia, challenging the norms. And the 1 Hour Guide really picks up on that.
Yeah, the guide makes this point that questioning assumptions is crucial for anything, really, but especially in business.
They give the example of Einstein going against Newtonian physics, which was huge EE at the time.
It was like the unbreakable law, and he dared to question it. That takes some guts.
It does. So, thinking about your own field, is there some unshakable truth that maybe deserves a second look?
That's a good one to ponder. Makes you think.
And this ties into another thing the guide brings up. Failure. Einstein had a lot of it early on.
Rejections, slow recognition. Sounds familiar, huh? The entrepreneur's life in a nutshell.
Right. But he kept going. The 1 Hour Guide uses this phrase, stepping stones, which I thought was brilliant.
I like that. Like, each setback wasn't a dead end. It was leading him somewhere.
Exactly. It reframes the whole idea of failure, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So for all of us out there facing setbacks, how can we see them as stepping stones, not roadblocks?
It's a mindset shift, for sure. Asking yourself, what can I learn from this? Where is it taking me next, T?
And it wasn't just blind persistence either, right? The 1 Hour Guide talks about this mix of curiosity and discipline in Einstein.
Ah, that's so key. It reminds me of that story about him imagining riding a light beam as a kid.
Oh, right. A pure what-if moment. Playful curiosity, but then he backed it up with serious work.
Like during his miracle year. The 1 Hour Guide points out that wasn't just luck, it was years of focused effort paying off.
So it's not enough to just have the aha moment. Got to put in the grind, too.
Exactly. What systems do you have for that, by the way, for turning inspiration into action?
Now that's getting personal. But it's a good question for all of us.
It is. And you know, this whole thing about Einstein working solo, the 1 Hour Guide challenges that too.
You mean he wasn't just a lone wolf genius in his attic?
Nope. He collaborated, bounced ideas off others, even had arguments with colleagues.
That's important for us to remember too, right? Like knowing when to go solo, when to team up.
Absolutely. So, thinking about your current project, is there a spot where a fresh perspective would help?
Good question. I'm sensing a theme here. Lots of self-reflection thanks to this 1 Hour Guide.
That's the point. But there's one more thing the guide highlights about Einstein that I found really powerful.
Let's hear it.
It's this idea of integrity beyond just equations, you know, like his pacifism, his social activism.
So he wasn't just a brain in a jar. He cared about the world.
And the guide ties this into purpose-driven businesses, which are so relevant today.
Makes sense. People want to support companies that stand for something, not just profits.
Right. So it begs the question, what positive impact does your work have? Or could it have?
That's something we all need to think about, for sure.
It's funny, right before we went on that whole tangent.
I know. Got a bit carried away.
Happens to the best of us.
Huh.
But where were we? Ah, yes, the ethical side of Einstein.
It's not something you typically think about with, physics genius.
Right, but Isaacson really emphasizes it in the biography. Einstein wasn't just about equations, you know?
He was engaged with the world, right? Not hiding in his ivory tower.
Exactly. Pacifism, social justice. He spoke out against war, nuclear weapons.
He saw the potential of his work, but also the dangers.
And the 1 Hour Guide connects that to ethical leadership today, which is so relevant.
It is. Consumers are more aware than ever of how companies impact the world.
So it's not enough to just chase profits anymore, right?
It's about values, purpose, walking the walk.
The guide argues that consumers want to support businesses that align with their values.
Makes sense. People want to feel good about where their money goes.
It's a shift, for sure. Companies need to be more transparent, more mindful.
Which brings us back to Einstein. He wasn't afraid to speak out, even when it was unpopular.
He had that conviction, you know? Stood up for what he believed in.
The 1 Hour Guide calls it courage and says it's essential for leaders today. So smarts and innovation aren't enough. Got to have that moral compass too.
Exactly. It's about using your influence for good, making the world better.
Speaking of which, that miracle year of Einstein's,
Yeah.
4 groundbreaking papers in 1 year.
It's almost unbelievable, right? Was it all just like raw genius?
That's what I'm wondering. How is that even possible?
Well, the 1 Hour Guide dives into that. It says that, yes, Einstein was brilliant,
But there was more to it, right?
right. It was years of work, of pursuing his passions, of not giving up.
So not just a sudden flash of insight, but the culmination of all that effort.
Exactly. Consistent action. That's what the guide emphasizes.
Like that Edison quote, right?
Yeah.
Genius is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration.
Exactly. And Einstein, for all his brilliance, he still put in the work.
It's encouraging, talent's not everything, it's the dedication too.
And remember our talk about collaboration, Einstein wasn't always solo, even during that year.
Right. Bouncing ideas off others, getting those different perspectives.
The 1 Hour Guide reminds us it's about balance. Independent work, NED, collaboration.
Knowing when to lead, when to delegate, when to seek input.
That's tough, right? Finding that sweet spot.
It is. But hey, Einstein could do it.
And speaking of tough things, let's talk about Einstein challenging norms. I mean, taking on Newtonian physics, wow.
It was revolutionary, going against everything everyone believed.
The 1 Hour Guide points out that's where innovation comes from. Questioning assumptions.
Being willing to be wrong, to look at things differently.
And that takes guts, especially when you're going against the grain like that.
But look what it led to. Relativity, changing our whole understanding of the universe.
So how do we cultivate that mindset, that willingness to challenge the status quo?
Yeah, where do we even start with that? It's pretty daunting.
The 1 Hour Guide has a simple suggestion. Ask why more often.
Why? As in, why do we do things this way? Why is this considered the truth?
Exactly. Not to be disrespectful, but to be curious.
And that curiosity, that's what drove Einstein, right? Always asking questions.
Which brings us to something else the guide highlights. Thought experiments. I always loved those.
What are those exactly? I'm picturing Einstein sitting in a bathtub, Eureka.
Well, not quite. It's more like playing out scenarios in your mind.
Testing ideas without needing a lab or equipment.
Exactly. Like Einstein imagining himself chasing a beam of light.
Whoa, what happens then? Does he catch it?
It's more about what does that tell us about how light behaves?
So thought experiments are like a mental playground for innovation.
And through that play, Einstein made breakthroughs, like with special relativity.
So it's not always about having fancy tools. Sometimes it's about using our imaginations.
Exactly. And that's applicable to anything, not just science.
Going through all this with the 1 Hour Guide, it's clear Einstein was more than just a scientist.
He was a thinker, a philosopher, a person who truly cared about the world.
And the guide does a fantastic job of extracting those deeper lessons.
Like this one about embracing our uniqueness. Einstein was an original, didn't try to fit in.
He had that crazy hair for a reason, right? It was part of his persona.
And the guide argues that authenticity is key for leadership.
People can spot a fake from a mile away. Got to be genuine.
It builds trust, respect, allows for real connection.
And connection is something Einstein valued too, right? Despite being a lone genius.
Right, remember, back to that balance of collaboration and independence.
The guide points out he could do both. Solo and teamwork. So it's not about choosing one, it's about being flexible, knowing when each is needed.
And that's tough, but it's a skill worth developing for sure.
And let's not forget Einstein's resilience. He had setbacks, but never gave up.
The guide emphasizes that too. Resilience is essential for achieving anything worthwhile.
It's about that grit, that determination to keep going when things get tough.
And a lot of that comes from passion, right? Einstein loved physics. It fueled him.
The 1 Hour Guide reminds us, finding work you're passionate about makes a huge difference.
It gives you that extra push when you hit obstacles, that's for sure.
So it's not just about any job. It's about finding something that truly resonates with you.
And that might take time, exploration, maybe even some risks along the way.
But hey, isn't that what life's all about? Finding what makes us tick.
As we keep diving into this book and the 1 Hour Guide, I'm realizing
What's that?
there's so much to learn from Einstein that goes way beyond just science.
It's like we're uncovering these hidden layers of wisdom and insight.
And they can be applied to anything, our careers, relationships, personal growth.
I'm excited to see what else we find. But for now, I think we need a little break.
A break from all this Einsteining. All right, sounds good to me.
Welcome back to the 1 Hour Guide by Anil Natu.
As we wrap up our deep dive into Einstein, His Life in Universe. I gotta say,
What's that?
this book, along with Anil Nathu's 1 Hour Guide, has really,
Changed your thinking.
yeah, like about what it really means to be a visionary
I
leader.
get that. It's easy to see Einstein as this, untouchable genius.
Exactly. But Isaacson's biography and the insights from the guide, they show
A different side of him.
a more human side. It wasn't all about raw intellect.
It was about curiosity, right?
Yep.
And not conforming, sticking with it through failures.
And imagination. All things we can learn from no matter what we do.
The 1 Hour Guide does a fantastic job of making those connections.
From like abstract genius stuff to actual business advice, it's amazing.
It's like we've been given this, roadmap.
Roadmap, exactly. And speaking of guides, as we wrap up today,
Yeah.
I want to bring up something we touched on before. Simplification.
Ah, right. Einstein was known for explaining complex things simply,
The 1 Hour Guide highlights that as like a crucial leadership skill.
especially nowadays, right? So much information overload.
If you can't get your ideas across clearly, simply, they just get lost.
So it's not just about the ideas themselves, it's how you communicate them.
The guide uses this example of Einstein explaining relativity to a child.
Oh, I remember that. Like, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it yourself.
Makes you think, how often do we get bogged down in jargon and all that?
For getting that clear communication, that's how you connect with people.
And inspire them. It's not about dumbing down, it's about finding that.
Elegance, right? Saying a lot with a little.
And Einstein nailed that. He could talk to scientists and regular folks.
And they all understood. That's the key. It's a good reminder for all of us.
Whether we're experts or not, making things clear, that's powerful.
It really is. Now, as we wrap up this whole deep dive,
There's one last thought I want to leave everyone with.
okay, lay it on me.
It's from Einstein, His Life and Universe, and the 1 Hour Guide emphasizes it too.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Einstein said, imagination is more important than knowledge.
Wow, that's powerful. Coming from him, especially.
Even focusing on his knowledge, his discoveries.
But what set him apart was that ability to imagine, to think beyond what's known,
Exactly, and that's something we can all cultivate.
allowing ourselves to dream, to wonder what if, and then actually pursue it.
Just like Einstein did. So to everyone listening,
This is your challenge.
what's something impossible in your field that maybe, with a little imagination?
Isn't so impossible after all? Let that question guide you.
And remember, like the 1 Hour Guide says, even the longest journey.
Starts with a single step. Thank you for joining us today.
And be sure to visit the 1 Hour Guide website for more insights from Anil Nathu.